This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Telly Edwards. Tonight's top stories. Chinese President Xi Jinping reaffirms support for Myanmar's new government. Leader Min Aung Hlaing afforded a state visit to Beijing. The two sides agreeing a raft of deals, deepening their strategic partnership. Now, Japan's central bank hikes interest rates to 1%, the highest level in more than 30 years. The move aimed at curbing inflation after years of ultra-low rates and persistent price declines. Now, China's economic figures for May show a split picture. Retail sales declined for the first time since reopening after the COVID-19 pandemic, while industrial output maintained strong growth. Now, Donald Trump says that a framework deal with Iran has been signed, but major questions remain as Tehran's top diplomat insists on Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon. Even so, the U.S. president is hailing the breakthrough on the world stage, telling G7 leaders in France that he will now focus on ending the war in Ukraine. Also tonight, no cameras, no actors, just prompts entered into a computer. Artificial intelligence in the spotlight at this year's Shanghai International Film Festival, amid growing concerns about the impact of the tech that's already disrupting China's microdrama industry. Chinese President Xi Jinping has endorsed the political leadership of Myanmar's new government as he meets with former Army Chief Min Aung Hlaing in Beijing. The two leaders witnessed the signing of 18 memorandums of cooperation. The deals cover cross-border transportation in the Greater Mekong sub-region, natural disaster assistance, trade, as well as health and media. Now, they also held talks in Beijing's Great Hall of the People. Chinese state media reported Mr. Xi expressing an interest in deepening China's ties with Myanmar to a comprehensive strategic cooperation. Now, the visit marks Min Aung Hlaing's first visit to China since becoming president. That comes after his trip to India, where he met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, our senior correspondents join us live to break down the significance of this visit. We've got Tan Yu Guan in Shanghai and Liang Wai-kit in Hanoi. We're going to start things off with you first, Yu Guan. So we know that Beijing, they've been rather cautious after the 2021 coup, but it has since rolled out the red carpet for Myanmar. What's with the change of heart?
Well, Telly, there's that old line in foreign policy. Countries do not have permanent friends, only permanent interests. And that's a useful way to understand Beijing's approach today here. China's interests in Myanmar have not really changed. It wants stability on its borders, action against cross-border crime, and progress on Chinese-backed infrastructure projects. Over the last couple of years, those interests have not really shifted. What really changed is how Beijing's calculation about how best to protect those interests. For the past few years, China has had to deal with a messy reality in Myanmar: civil conflict, instability along the border, scam centers targeting Chinese nationals, and uncertainty over Chinese-backed projects. At the same time, Min Aung Hlaing has now formalized his position as president after Myanmar's disputed elections. That gives Beijing a sort of diplomatic cover to deal with him more openly as head of state. That said, Beijing is making a significant move. In many ways, Min's government remains deeply controversial. For example, ASEAN has not expelled Myanmar, but since 2021, it's largely kept Min Aung Hlaing away from leaders' summits, inviting only non-political representatives instead. So when Beijing gives in a full state visit honors, it carries real political weight. In effect, China has sort of decided that, Myanmar's current leadership is the authority it needs to work with if it wants stability on its border, action against cross-border crime, and progress on Chinese-backed projects. So I would not call this a sudden policy reversal. It's more of a public endorsement of a relationship Beijing now sees as necessary to advance its strategic interests.
So let's bring Waikit into the conversation here. So we've heard China's point of view there, but what about the Myanmar leader? I mean, what's he hoping to gain from this trip to Beijing?
Yeah, Telly, I want to quickly build on my colleague Tan Yu Guan's point about his analogy about no permanent enemies and friends. In fact, China, Myanmar, they're not just friends. They're more than friends. They've been framing their relationship as brothers, the Pakpor relationship. And this is precisely why Myanmar and China have been historically close. And even though Yu Guan said earlier that this is an endorsement with the state visit, there have been hints of endorsement during the coup from the part of China. So this official visit, Min Aung Hlaing, is unlikely to be actively seeking for more endorsement because he's already gotten that backing from Beijing. What he's likely to look out for really are the benefits from the outcomes of the talks. Now, I've got a contact who told me that this visit has been months in the making, since April. And Beijing has been holding off this invite because it was waiting for Myanmar to come up with stronger and more concrete proposals on how it will work together with China within the Myanmar-China economic framework. So we may expect that this will now take shape because Min Aung Hlaing is now already in China, which means China is, in a way, satisfied with the working proposals from Myanmar's side. So cooperation on oil and gas tie-ups as well as earthquake rehabilitation efforts may take shape. The other thing that Min Aung Hlaing is quickly looking out for is security. Shared border interests, of course, between both sides is border security. If you open trade routes, it benefits both sides. But for Myanmar alone, being able to reopen the border means it has got more control over territories, which is to its advantage. And also, Min Aung Hlaing had also visited an aerospace agency while in China. What this tells me is that he's always looking out for technology such as aerospace that could result in drones, which is a critical element in the ongoing fight with the resistance forces. And we know that Russia has been working with Myanmar on aerospace technology. What this tells me is that Min Aung Hlaing is not putting all his eggs in one basket. He is, at the same time, trying to reduce dependence on any one party.
So quite a long list there from Myanmar's wish list. But Yu Guan, what about Beijing? You know, what sort of outcomes are they looking for from this visit?
Well, Beijing is looking for three things essentially. First, security. Xi Jinping specifically talked about cooperation against telecom scams, online gambling operations, and other cross-border crimes. This has become a major concern for Chinese authorities since many of the victims of such scams are people within China. You can feel the concern here in Shanghai. Police have been making warning calls to residents. Both my cameraman and I have received them. And a friend of mine has even received an in-person visit from the police. And some people, myself included, have had bank transfers delayed by anti-fraud checks, specifically meant to stop transfers from victims of such scams. Second, China wants stability. As Waikit mentioned there, China wants a calmer situation in Myanmar, particularly in the border regions. Now, Beijing has repeatedly said that it supports peace and reconciliation there, but its immediate concern is also very practical. A secure environment for its nationals in Myanmar, its companies, and its projects. Third, connectivity. Now, Xi Jinping again highlighted the China-Myanmar economic corridor, which Beijing sees as a flagship Belt and Road project. This is where Myanmar's geography becomes so important. A planned deep-sea port on Myanmar's western coast is linked to oil and gas pipeline running into China's southwestern Yunnan province. That gives China a possible route to the Indian Ocean. In the case of a conflict, this can reduce Beijing's dependence on the Strait of Malacca. Oteli?
So, Waikit, you've mentioned that China-Myanmar relationship, they're like brothers. But Min Aung Hlaing went to India first before his Beijing visit. So what do we read into that?
Yeah, there's always this element of strategic balance. Some are saying that India is now being more assertive in Myanmar to balance the influence of China and the other way around. One analyst I spoke to said that, Myanmar's foreign policy may not be sophisticated, but Myanmar over the years have learned to, in his words, play India against China, China against India to its own advantage. But there's another element away from this macro view. On the ground, this analyst is also saying that there is a growing China, anti-India sentiment from its people. So this will add on more complexities in terms of the dynamics between Myanmar, India, China relations. Now, I want to also make another point about Myanmar's engagement with the world as a whole. Now, we've been looking at the region, how Myanmar engages with its neighbors, with Thailand, with ASEAN. But during the coup, Myanmar has also been actively cultivating other partners. During the coup, it has established diplomatic ties with 2 other countries, Guinea-Bissau and Somalia, and it has also kept its ambassador-level exchanges with a few African countries. So what this tells us is that while Myanmar needs to focus on engagement with the region, it is keeping its doors open when it comes to engaging with any types of partners.
Great talking to you both on China-Myanmar relations. CNA senior correspondents Tan Yu Guan in Shanghai and Liang Wai-kit in Hanoi. President Donald Trump begins his first full day of the G7 summit in France following the announcement of a closely watched interim peace deal between the US and Iran. Speaking to French President Emmanuel Macron, Mr. Trump says that Russia's war against Ukraine is in his focus again. This comes as G7 leaders hold a special working session with President Volodymyr Zelensky amid renewed diplomatic efforts to end the multi-year war with Russia. The Middle East crisis remains high on the agenda, with leaders from Egypt, Qatar and the UAE joining talks on regional stability. France says that bloc members are ready to support maritime operations in the Strait of Hormuz in 2 to 3 days. Japan, a signatory to a European-backed plan for maritime security operations in the Strait of Hormuz, says that it has yet to decide on whether to dispatch troops to the waterway. Now, Ross Cullen for CNA. He joins us live now from Evian. Ross, first up, what are some of the key concerns that the other leaders at the summit have to Mr. Trump's pursuit of a deal to so-called end the war in Ukraine?
Hi, Telly. Sorry, just a lot of noise here from the helicopter traffic as the leaders shuttle in and out, and the French military continues its patrols of the skies here in Evian. We have heard from Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, releasing a statement just after the conclusion of those joint talks this morning, saying that, quote, the key is to strengthen air defense for Ukraine and to nudge diplomacy to get Russia to end its war. Peace is needed. It was just over an hour, the joint session of the G7 leaders and the Ukrainian president. Also, some one-on-ones took place. The French president actually left the grounds of the hotel where the talks were taking place to personally walk with Volodymyr Zelensky from his official delegation car to have some time, just the two men speaking alone. Also, time for Keir Starmer to speak to Volodymyr Zelensky. The British Prime Minister also announcing a new package of sanctions from London on Moscow after the seizure of a Russian shadow tanker, including the delivery of extra enriched uranium from the UK to Ukraine to help supply Ukraine's civil nuclear power plants. There was the possibility of this one-on-one Zelensky-Trump as well, but it seems that hasn't happened for now because Donald Trump has already moved on to hold one-on-ones with some of the Middle Eastern leaders who are turning up to discuss this afternoon the US-Iran peace accord.
So tell us more about that, Ross, because we know that that interim deal is in place. So then what do we expect from today's G7 session on the Middle East?
Well, the Qatari Emir has already had one-on-one talks with Donald Trump. Also in attendance, the United Arab Emirates and Egypt as well, to try to speak more about the future reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which the US president says will take place from Friday, a complete reopening of that crucial waterway through which passes some 20% of global energy exports. However, the European allies here at the G7 are concerned about the actual detail, because we've heard from the US Vice President as well, J.D. Vance, saying that the document that has been agreed between Tehran and Washington, that's going to be signed in Switzerland on Friday, is very general, only a page and a half, and is not specific. So it just extends that 60-day ceasefire. So what a lot of the Middle East leaders and the European leaders want to hear from the United States delegation is how those negotiations with Iran are going to take place going forward. The Europeans certainly want to be involved in those negotiations this time around, as they were in 2015 for the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the original Iran deal that was signed by Barack Obama that President Trump pulled out of during his first term. Ateli?
Well, thanks for that report on the G7 summit. Ross Cullen for CNA in Evian, France. On that note, we are going to go for a break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, the Bank of Japan hits a milestone in policy normalization. We'll be speaking to an expert about what this means for the economy and where rates can go next. Hello again. Good to have your company on East Asia tonight. It is now time for your business news with Roland Lim, and we're talking about China's economic indicators out for May. How is it looking?
Yeah, it's looking slightly imbalanced, it would seem. Retail sales shrank for the first time since reopening of the COVID-19 pandemic. The 0.6% on-year decline also worse than analysts' expectations. Consumer spending has been largely in the doldrums following a prolonged real estate crisis following a fragile jobs market. A weakness in property among the main drags on fixed asset investments. The data for the year to May extended its decline to 4.1%, also deeper than market forecasts. China's Statistics Bureau attributed the slowdown to part of the extreme weather, as well as shifts to new growth drivers.
展望下阶段呢，我国投资空间依然广阔，新型城镇化建设、推进乡村振兴、新质生产力发展、公共服务提升等，都需要投资的支持。
In contrast, industrial output for the month of May grew better than expected. It climbed 4.5% on year as an artificial intelligence-driven surge in high-tech manufacturing mostly helped to offset headwinds from the fighting in the Gulf. But some analysts are warning that the strong performance in exports could lead to tensions with economic partners. Now, China's trade dynamic is among the issues global leaders are discussing at the G7 summit, in France. The economic unevenness also playing out within China's housing sector. Home prices in major cities extending their growth in May, but weakness in other parts pushed the overall figure down 0.2% on month. Now, on an annual basis, new home prices fell 3.5%. The data has suggested that recovery had been largely limited to areas benefiting from AI-related demand. A Chinese tech giant Alibaba's home city, Hangzhou, saw the biggest gain in new home prices. The area is also a host to another prominent AI-related firm, Inhee Robotics. Analysts from major brokerages have been indicating the AI-linked growth could end the prolonged property slump. But there is lingering pessimism over the sector. Shares of key property firms tumbled at one point to levels last seen before a raft of measures from the authorities back in 2024 that drove a market turnaround. The Bank of Japan has raised interest rates to its highest in 31 years. It's a widely expected move, as the central bank has been embarking on normalizing policy after years of heavy monetary stimulus. The decision made to tame inflation risks that have been on the rise, partly due to surging energy costs linked to the fighting in the Gulf. The Bank of Japan said it will maintain support for the economy despite the reduced risk of a significant slowdown. At a press conference, Deputy Governor Shinichi Uchida said that the bank needs to be mindful of inflation, adding that the situation in the Middle East will be a factor in deciding subsequent rate decisions. Mr. Uchida had been standing in for Governor Kazuo Ueda, who's been currently hospitalized for a liver infection. Nikkei 225 hitting a record 70,000 for the first time after the decision. before paring back those gains to end just under 69,404 points. And let's check in on the yen, unchanged, 160.32 to the dollar. And let's take a deeper dive into the implications of the BOJ's decision. We cross over live to Tokyo. Jasper Cole, a director at Monex Group, one of Japan's leading online financial services, joins us. Jasper, good to have you on the show as always. Now, Bank Governor Ueda has spent months telegraphing the BOJ's path towards normalization. Now, he's in hospital, so he missed today's press conference. But did his deputy, Uchida, deliver the same message?
That's exactly right. I mean, normalization continues. Very interestingly, we've obviously come from zero policy rates to now 1%. And the big question is, where is the neutral policy rate? And the correct answer is that, of course, nobody knows. The analyst community thinks that it's somewhere between 1.5% and 2%. I personally think that it's going to be closer to 3%, but the measured pace of the Bank of Japan adjustment and normalization is very likely to continue.
Okay, with the US dollar, Japanese yen pairing still hovering at 160 level, policy risks remains very much in play here. At these levels, how much currency weakness do you think policymakers are willing to tolerate?
It's not about the absolute level of dollar yen or any other currency. Policymakers are concerned about the volatility. So if you do get, over a 24-hour or 48-hour period, a spike in the yen, that's when the Ministry of Finance is going to get concerned about the whole thing. But in terms of the absolute level, basically, the 160 level is something that's perfectly tolerable because it actually creates very nice profit windfalls for Japanese industrial companies. As you know, for every 10 yen of yen weakness, Japanese companies get a windfall profit gain of around 8 percentage points. So yen weakness does go hand in hand with the Nikkei, with the stock market going up.
And with the BOJ signaling that 1% is not the end to its tightening cycle, how vulnerable then does that make the yen carry trades?
I don't think that the yen carry trade is at risk here. In the sense of that Japanese banks are extremely well capitalized. They're very eager to lend. They're making lots of money because the steepness of the Japanese yield curve. You've got short-term interest rates having gone up, from 0 to 1%. You've got long-term interest rates having gone up basically from 0 to 3%, which means that Japanese banks, for the first time in 30 years, are actually making money, lending not just to Mr. and Mrs. Watanabe, but also to global speculators who want to borrow yen to invest in global assets.
At the same time, though, Japan's 10-year yields have approached or close to 2.8%. Now, that's a level not seen since 1996. Does that move to 1% help restore some sort of confidence in the bond market, or do you think it'll add pressure to longer-term yields?
No, Japanese yields will continue to be increasing. Where I think the Bank of Japan is overly conservative is in their estimation of inflation. Yes, you've got the consumer price index obviously going up and down with energy prices and food prices, but the reality of wages increasing, of asset prices increasing, of bottlenecks because of shortages of labor, construction material, energy everywhere. As a result of that, the inflation risk in Japan, in my personal opinion, is much higher than what the conservative diplomats at the Bank of Japan are suggesting.
So the bigger picture, does a hawkish BOJ actually improve Japan's policy credibility, or does it expose a deeper problem, that is, its fiscal subsidies, its currency intervention, and its low rates, not enough to keep that system all together?
Look, I mean, the Japanese, as you know very well, the elites are extremely coordinated. Nothing weird, nothing out of the ordinary, nothing move fast and break things is going to be happening here. This is a measured pace. But as I said before, yen depreciation is the outcome of effectively a very measured and conservative approach. Nobody, neither Prime Minister Takaichi nor the Bank of Japan, wants to kill off demand at this juncture in the global and domestic cycle.
And this fear that there could be a global spillover effect if Japanese investors start to begin to repatriate some of the yen back into domestic bonds, that's going to be reducing demand for U.S. treasuries and other overseas fixed income assets. That's not a fear that you have right now.
No, absolutely not. And I think, this idea that this is a zero-sum game, in the sense of that you've got Japanese insurance companies having to buy either treasuries or JGBs makes absolutely no sense, because for the first time in 30 years, we've got the pie actually expanding. You've got premium income, you've got insurance premium income. Everything is growing in Japan because we now have nominal growth in Japan that is running between 4 and 5%. So the pie is expanding. So Japanese asset managers will continue to buy US treasuries while at the same time starting to buy more JGBs.
Jasper, appreciate all that analysis. That was Jasper Cole, director at Monex Group. And that is also the end of the business segment for this hour. Back to you, Telly.
I really enjoyed that interview. Thanks so very much for that, Roland. Right, time now for another break, but coming up on East Asia tonight, Iran's top diplomat calls ending the war, including in Lebanon, the most important issue. Even as Donald Trump says their framework deal is now in its second stage. Plus, a special report on the possible risks that AI could bring to the cities of the future. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Chinese President Xi Jinping reaffirms support for Myanmar's new government as he meets leader Min Aung Hlaing in Beijing. Both sides signing a raft of deals ranging from cross-border transportation to trade. And Japan's central bank hikes interest rates to 1%, the highest level in more than 30 years, in a widely expected move aimed at taming inflation. And in China, retail sales fall for the first time since its post-pandemic reopening, but factory output remains resilient, growing better than expected. Uncertainty surrounds the framework deal between the US and Iran, with key questions remain unanswered. President Donald Trump says that the agreement is all signed by both sides, while Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says that a new round of talks on a final deal will likely begin on Friday in Geneva, where an in-person signing is expected. Now, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has described the interim agreement as an important step to end the conflict, but said on Monday that a final deal has yet to take shape. The interim agreement extends an April truce by another 60 days and reopens the Strait of Hormuz. Now, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance says that it also includes a very significant sanctions relief package for Iran. Mr. Trump says Iran has agreed never to have a nuclear weapon, a key U.S. demand, but that has not been confirmed by Tehran. The deal also calls for an end to Israeli hostilities in Lebanon. Iran's foreign minister stressing that any Israeli attack or continued troop presence there violates the agreement. Fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon had eased following the peace deal's announcement. But Israel's prime minister said that its forces will remain in the south for as long as needed. Now, Blake Sifton for CNA, he joins us live now from Tel Aviv. Blake, help us clear the air on this one. We've got U.S. Vice President Vance appearing to confirm a $300 billion reconstruction fund for Iran, but Mr. Trump has apparently denied that. What do you know on that front?
Good evening, Int'l. Well, that's right. Reports have said that the U.S. is considering establishing that $300 billion reconstruction fund, and it would be tied to Iran adhering to this initial deal to be signed on Friday, as well as reaching a nuclear deal in those subsequent negotiations. It's being seen as an incentive to convince Iran to make concessions. An unnamed U.S. official speaking to reporters yesterday said that it's being considered, along with sanctions relief and the release of some $24 billion in frozen Iranian assets. Now, yesterday, President Trump appeared to reject this. He said the story that the U.S. is paying $300 billion is fake news put out by the Democrats. Today at the G7, President Trump said that the U.S. has no obligation to invest money in Iran and will not be investing money in Iran. And I think perhaps the issue here may be language, because President Trump has refuted the suggestion that the U.S. will be making direct payments to Iran. But the reports for this fund say that the U.S. will establish the fund, but international companies that want to invest in Iran's energy sector will finance it. And as you say, Vice President Vance appeared to confirm that the fund is being considered, saying that's the sort of thing they would have access to, so as long as they honor their end of the obligation.
So also help us understand this. Where does this preliminary agreement between the U.S. and Iran leave Israel?
Well, this agreement between the U.S. and Iran has been widely condemned by politicians across the political spectrum here in Israel. Last night, Prime Minister Netanyahu gave an address in which he didn't directly criticize the agreement, but he did make great efforts to distance himself from it. He stressed that this was an agreement reached by President Trump. And Israel was, of course, not in these negotiations. They were completely sidelined in these negotiations. And the media here is really jumping on the fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu admitted yesterday that the Israeli government doesn't even know the exact details of this agreement. But there are plenty of fears here that the agreement will limit the freedom of action of Israel's military when it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon. As you say, it's meant to establish a ceasefire in Lebanon. U.S. officials have suggested, though, that it doesn't call for the Israeli military to withdraw from southern Lebanon. And Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday emphatically said that the Israeli military would remain in southern Lebanon as long as is necessary. But today we heard from Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, and he said that Israel's continued presence in southern Lebanon, as well as continuing Israeli attacks in southern Lebanon, will be considered a violation of this interim agreement. President Trump has said that Israel needs to be more responsible in Lebanon moving forward. Only today, however, there are reports that those attacks in southern Lebanon are continuing. There's a report that at least one Israeli drone strike targeted a vehicle in the south of Lebanon.
Blake Sifton for CNA Tel Aviv. Thanks for that report. Now, AI-powered cities of the future dominated discussions at the World Cities Summit in Singapore. From enhancing livelihoods to reducing emissions and optimizing energy use, city planners are harnessing AI for good. CNA's Rani Samtani tells us more.
Can AI make our cities smarter and better places to live and work?
We believe that AI will bring so much benefit in transportation system.
With AI and with these smart tools, it really helps us to see what are the different possibilities and how much can we enhance or push the boundaries in terms of building.
Cities around the world are already generating enormous amounts of data. Urban designers and city planning experts are optimistic that we could transform this information to improve transport networks, reduce emissions, and even develop more affordable housing strategies.
You can build AI-powered models, digital twins, etc., that enable a lot more confidence in being able to justify certain decision-making. So I think in that sense, the potential is huge.
Policymakers are leveraging AI to develop what's being called cognitive cities, combining artificial intelligence with big data collected from smart cities. We could predict and optimize urban services from traffic flow, air and noise pollution to waste management and public security.
The whole idea of cognitive city is looking at all the smart cities of last decades and really finding how can we bring and make solutions that makes us more happy, gives us back our time, and really elevate our human experience.
But of course, AI alone cannot solve all our problems.
The more that we depend on AI, the bigger the risks in terms of data trust, data privacy, the risks of models hallucinating and actually leading to unthought of impacts. Right? AI is not going to make a poorly planned city better planned just by incorporating AI within the processes. Right? So you need to have core foundational principles in place first in order for the AI to elevate those to a higher level. Obviously in Singapore we're very lucky that we're an extremely well-planned city-state, and so the potential for AI to yield really big benefits is much higher. But you look at any other city, especially in Southeast Asia, and the question of, well, how beneficial can our AI be to urban planning is very open-ended and arguably quite negligible.
Stephen Ritz of Green Bronx Machine says humans need to remain in the loop when it comes to creating forward-looking, equitable living spaces.
I understand that AI is here and it's not going anywhere, but that doesn't mean it has to be our best buddy. It means we should use it to manage ourselves and positive outcomes to grow something greater. So the fact that we can use technology and get young people inspired about productivity, about helping people, about building, about creating, and feeding people nourishing minds in a manner that is equitable, transformative, inclusive, and ends poverty is really what it's all about.
Many people believe AI is a powerful tool that can be used for good. But the clear message from experts and policymakers here at the World City Summit is that the success of urban areas in the future will not be measured by how much technology is deployed, but by how efficiently that technology is used to improve livelihoods. Rani Samtani, CNA, Singapore.
Ahead on East Asia tonight, more insights from the World Cities Summit. CNA's Grace Shin speaks with the planner behind Seoul's affluent Gangnam district on lessons for aging societies and housing affordability. For decades now, city planners worried about accommodating more people. Today, some are grappling with the opposite problem: aging populations and falling birth rates. Yet in Seoul, one of the world's fastest aging cities, housing demand remains strong and affordability a challenge. CNA's Grace Shin spoke with Inhee Kim, master planner of Seoul's modern Gangnam district, about what that says about the future of urban living.
When I think 30 years ago or 40 years ago, in Korea, all over the nation, politicians, developers, and professional citizens, we tried to reduce the birth rate. Just 30 years ago. And nowadays, we should try to improve the birth rate. I think the birth rate could be a trend. But 2 years ago, I think 2024 is a turning point. The birth rate began to increase, and especially in Gangnam-gu, it's most important, the one-person household. But in Gangnam-gu, the birth rate, the rate increased dramatically, and I'm sure when the Gangnam-gu districts or Seoul government give more opportunity to health care and child care and the environment, good environment for the parents and children. Then the young generation begin to get married and have children. And I think I realize nowadays in the last 2 years, we have a lot of the result achievement of the raising of birth rate. And I think that's why, and also Gangnam-gu or Seoul government, we don't have any problem to decrease the birth rate, because maybe in South Korea, in another city has a problem, but still in Seoul and Gangnam-gu, still concentrated not only human resources but also the financial resources.
Because demand for the Seoul capital is relatively high. But then there are some critics saying Seoul is facing one of the worst housing living costs, house prices are off the roof. Many youth have to pay massive debt in order to get the house. But then along that with the declining population, would that mean there will be empty houses that Seoul is just building too many of?
As I told, Seoul is the last city to think about
this problem.
the decreasing of the problem. Very controversial, but I think, according to statistic, we have a deficit about high-end apartment, good apartment, because the income in Seoul is very high, but the housing quality is very low. And we have two tasks. The first one, we should provide support a lot of good housing, and second, of course, the affordability, the public housing for the young generation. Of course, it is important. But the urban policies focus on the young generation, and they make a housing in city center very high price. I think that is a mismatch, because the public housing should we should apply support more housing in a little bit cheaper land. Still is expensive and so on. But the politician make location in very high expensive, and that is a mismatch. For me, in good in city center, good location, we supply high-end residential, high-end office, and with this contribution, public contribution plan again, we can support more housing in another districts. I think that could be satisfied not only the high-end, but also the young generation.
The general public.
Yeah. Of course, but the Seoul is a still expensive city, like Tokyo, London, Paris, and I cannot. This situation cannot avoid it.
Well, artificial intelligence also drawing growing attention at this year's Shanghai International Film Festival. With the new initiative, organizers are experimenting with new forms of AI-powered storytelling. CNA's Tan Yu-Guan with this report.
No cameras, no actors, no calls of action and cut. Instead, aspiring filmmakers are turning prompts into movies from their desks. It's a glimpse into the future of filmmaking.
Our film is an adaptation of an old Chinese story. 庄子和惠子子非鱼安知鱼之乐的那个对话. What we wanted to really capture was just the comedic timing of the dialogue. So in terms of dialogue, I dubbed one character. In fact, I dubbed both characters, both fishes. But the fat fish was my voice, but using AI to transcribe it into another voice. And the skinny fish was just my voice. It's absolutely end-to-end human input. AI is just a tool that we use along the way to speed things up, but it's very much, from the ideation to storyboarding to the script to generation, putting it all together, video, audio, and all of that stuff. It's all very much human-guided. AI tools are just a tool.
The AI Backlog Initiative brought together AI-first creators like Wu Han-kun and traditional filmmakers, creating a space for both sides to learn from one another as AI continues to shape the global film industry. By using AI to generate scripts, visuals, and even virtual actors, creators can now create content faster and at a fraction of the cost of traditional productions. This has raised questions for the future of filmmaking, but it has also raised new possibilities for storytelling and content creation. AI-powered content is already disrupting China's fast-growing microdrama industry, streamlining production and lowering costs. But it also raised concerns that actors and other creative professionals could see fewer job opportunities.
我觉得很多行业的人开始非常的关注这个领域，他可能因为陌生会带来一些焦虑，但是我觉得现在的趋势就是传统的影视行业人必须得学习掌握这种技能，然后它会对整个的制片流程产生一个比较深刻的变革。那么从我们这一次的初步尝试，我们是觉得某些人的创意、人的审美的这些工作其实是不会被取代的。
The growing popularity of content generation models such as Minimax's High-Lure AI and ByteDance's C-Dance show that AI is becoming a lucrative business. And it has fueled a fierce battle among Chinese tech firms vying for a bigger share of the AI market.
那其实我听说就是现在最长生成这个视频是15秒，那马上就是生成一次性生成1分钟的模型，可能也马上要来了。那以后会不会一键就可以生成一部电影呢？那其实这是很恐怖的事情，所以真的拭目以待。
Tan Yu Guan, CNA, Shanghai.
And finally, CNA remains Singapore's most trusted news brand. Well, that's according to the latest Reuters Institute study. Close to 4 in 5 people surveyed said that they trust the brand. And the news organization led the rankings for 6 consecutive years from 2019 to 2024. Now, in terms of brand trust, MediaCorp also secured 4 of the top 5 spots in Singapore. Overall trust in news here rose 1 point to just under 50%, 9 points above the global average. Now, CNA is also the most used online news source. Close to half of respondents said that they use it. WhatsApp and Facebook remain the top social media platforms for news, recording the biggest gains from the year before. But traditional platforms continue to lose ground, with print and TV news usage still declining. So that's why I'm glad you are still here with us watching Tuesday's edition of East Asia Tonight. For our Singapore audience, do stay on for the latest match highlights from the FIFA World Cup.
Iran shared the points with New Zealand following their opening Group G match in Los Angeles on a day when every game ended in a draw, the first time that's happened in 68 years. New Zealand took the lead at the Sophie Stadium after 7 minutes, Elijah just working with Chris Wood to make it 1-0. Iran struck back in the 32nd minute, Ramin Rahazian stealing in for the equalizer as the two sides went into the break 1-1. New Zealand regained the lead in the 54th minute, the Justin Wood partnership sending the winger through for his second of the match, but Iran equalized again 10 minutes later. Ramin's pinpoint cross headed in by Mohammad Mohebi to make it 2-2, honors even at the end of a free-flowing match. Earlier in the group, Egypt also held Belgium to a draw. The African giants took the lead in the 19th minute through Imam Ashur. The Belgians pressed for the equalizer and finally broke through when all-time leading goal scorer Romelu Lukaku was brought off the bench in the 66th minute. And within 20 seconds of coming on, his ball bounced off Egypt's Mohamed Hani into goal for the equalizer. The match ending 1-1 for a point apiece. A stunning surprise draw in Group H, where European champions Spain were expected to sweep aside World Cup debutants Cape Verde. But the African side's 40-year-old goalkeeper Bozinia repelled wave upon wave of Spanish attacks. Goalless at final whistle in one of the tournament's biggest ever shocks. An all-square in the other Group H fixture between Saudi Arabia and Uruguay in Miami as well. The Green Falcons flew ahead in the 41st minute. But the South Americans piled on the pressure and were rewarded in the 80th minute, Maxi Araujo scoring off the rebound. Uruguay pressed for the winner, but Saudi Arabia's goalkeeper ensured the match ended 1-1.